Today, we will be discussing the challenges women and gender-diverse individuals face when seeking sterilization in Japan. These challenges stem from strict requirements under the Maternal Protection Act. Under this law, women must meet specific criteria to access sterilization procedures. First, they must already have children. Second, they must prove that pregnancy would endanger their health. And finally, they must obtain spousal consent. These criteria are restrictive, particularly for single, childless women. For our case study today, we have two examples. Kazane Kajaya, a 27-year-old advocate, challenges societal norms and asserts her desire to opt out of fertility without conditions. She loves being a woman, but doesn't want the ability to have children. On the other hand, Hizui Taisuwa, a 24-year-old genderless model, seeks sterilization to eliminate any chance of pregnancy. However, as a single, childless individual, they face nearly insurmountable barriers under current laws. Advocates like Kazane and Hizui are pushing for changes in a courtroom environment dominated by male government representatives. The government, however, remains focused on increasing Japan's declining birth rate, creating additional resistance to their cause. In 1996, the Maternal Protection Act was revised to remove its eugenics clause, but it retained strict rules for sterilization and abortion. These rules technically apply to men as well. For instance, men seeking vasectomies must meet similar criteria. But clinics offering these procedures are far more accessible for men than they are for women. The fundamental issue here is reproductive autonomy. Women and gender-diverse individuals in Japan are fighting for the right to make decisions about their own bodies in a society that heavily emphasizes marriage and childbearing as the norm.
The first ideal outcome that I will be talking about is sterilization. One thing that we looked at was making sterilization more accessible for women in order for women to have full control and greater control over their reproductive choices and rights. In Japan, it's not always easy for women to take these steps in order to get the sterilization they need. One thing that we can do is enact laws that protect reproductive rights. This is just so that when women do get to this point or they do make the choice, no matter what choice it is, they don't have to face all the legal struggles that come along with the choice that they make. One thing that is also very hard to get is other kinds of birth control pills, which would prevent them from getting pregnant in the first place. Getting access to these can be very hard for women. So making things more accessible like birth control pills or the IUDs or the day after pills that aren't so expensive and hard to come by will make it very easy for women to not have to go through this mental state at all. The second ideal outcome that I'll be looking at is policy reforming. If this is not necessarily like laws or government policies, this would be more of like the stereotype of women always having to have kids and take care of their kids. One thing that I looked at was making it so that you can see if the baby would be right for this woman or family. A lot of times women, they will have good careers or busy lifestyles. So having a baby on top of that would not always be the best choice for them. And it can interfere with the kid's life and the mother's life. The next thing would be like a support group. So if women do go through with this decision, or they do not want to have a kid, or whether they're thinking about having a kid or not, or whether they should take birth control pills or not, support groups that kind of help women realize that it's okay to be thinking these things. These are very natural, and all women probably at some point do think of these things. Lastly, just eliminating those stereotypes in general. Everything should be more gender neutral. If people do have kids, equal responsibilities, and not always expecting the woman to have to do everything that a man can do as well.
Our international group is proposing a solution that includes two main pillars. Ultimately, we want to revise the Maternal Protection Act and provide reproductive freedom for all in Japan. However, we have to take into account Japan's historical, political, and cultural context in order to appeal to the Japanese government. In July 2023, Japan reviewed recommendations received during the Universal Periodic Review by the United Nations Human Rights Council, and ultimately rejected recommendations involving the Maternal Health Act and the abortion crime law. We cannot simply suggest a revision of the Maternal Protection Act. We must give evidence on why the revision is necessary. We have come up with a campaign outline that the Japanese government can implement to go along with the revision of the Maternal Protection Act. Underneath the revision of the Maternal Protection Act, we want to remove the requirement for spousal consent for abortion and sterilizations. The consent requirement of the law has casted a shadow on safe procedures. The consent requirement does not consider all women and excludes unmarried people. We also want to remove other strict requirements regarding reproductive rights. Remove the requirement that in order to receive a sterilization, you must have a child already. Provide clear, detailed regulations for medical practitioners, ensuring the law is consistently and fairly applied. This will protect doctors from incrimination and ensure they are adhering to fair practices. And ultimately, we want to make reproductive rights accessible to all and protect procedures under health insurance. The second pillar is a campaign to promote reproductive rights and diverse family structure. We want to launch a public awareness campaign that educates the public on reproductive rights and showcases diverse family structures to challenge the patriarchal family ideal that dominates Japanese society. Diverse family structures we want to highlight are single parents, co-parenting, LGBTQ+ families, and even people with no children. The family unit is not your traditional husband and wife with 2 kids. Reproductive rights include making your own decisions on if, when, and who to marry, and if you want to have children and how many. The campaign will aim to educate people on the importance of reproductive freedom as a fundamental human right. Many may not realize the implications of reproductive rights due to the lack of education on them. Reproductive rights are not a political issue, they are a health and social justice issue. Awareness of reproductive rights will ensure healthy and safe procedures, and people can look at the topic from a perspective of knowledge versus personal feelings. The campaign will also highlight the social benefits of reproductive freedoms. Showcasing more forms of diverse families has a potential to increase Japan's birth rate. People will feel empowered to begin making informed choices about their families and future. There will no longer be a hindrance of the government controlling life decisions. How does our solution fit into Japanese historical context? Well, Japan has a long history of state control over reproductive decision-making, beginning with the Eugenics Protection Law of 1948. Under this law, many sterilizations were performed for decades. The government pressured women with psychiatric conditions or intellectual and physical disabilities to get sterilization procedures, highlighting the government wants control over reproductive rights when it's convenient to them. For example, in the present time, they rejected recommendations by the United Nations Human Rights Council because they believe it is important to protect the fetus as a biological entity. The government is currently focused on growing the birth rate in Japan. They see abortion and sterilizations as a preventative measure to the birth rate. However, abortions and sterilizations were viewed very differently under the Eugenics Protection Law of 1948 to ensure people with disabilities were controlled. Japan's strict reproductive control
parallels to South Korea's history of population control policies. From 1953 to 2021, abortion was a crime in South Korea. However, from the 1960s to 2005, South Korea sought to limit the birth rate as a means of economic development and population management. During this time, many women could seek out abortion and sterilization procedures. From 1989 to 2009, the number of abortions was estimated to range from 30 to 50 million annually. An average of 5.6 abortion cases were prosecuted annually, highlighting the government's limited enforcement of the anti-abortion law. South Korea's family planning program was evaluated as the most successful example of a population control project. In the early 2000s, South Korea was faced with a new problem, a declining birth rate. Population policies shifted dramatically, and the government began enforcing the abortion law. The Japanese government can learn from South Korea. After strict regulations from reproductive rights leading to imprisonments of doctors and health complications for girls and women, there is a public outcry in South Korea for reform. After years of public activism and advocacy, abortion was decriminalized in January of 2021. The organization Joint Action continued to keep the public's attention on the issue, knowing public opinion could indirectly influence the constitutional's decision on decriminalization of abortion. The main factors that led to reform in South Korea were the changing political environment, shifts in general public opinion, and the progressive inclinations of judges, and a decrease in religious groups' influence on abortion. Japan can reach reproductive freedoms as well. The public outcry is there. People continue to protest the Maternal Protection Act. In the most recent Japanese election, a record number of women ran and were elected, showcasing the political environment is changing. How does our solution fit into the Japanese political context? The Japanese political structure is male-dominated. When proposing a solution to the Japanese government, we must consider how to appeal to the conservative male leaders to amend the Maternal Protection Act. The government would need parliamentary approval. Given that only 16% of lawmakers are women, it is a challenging task. However, there is an increase in women in political offices, which is promising. If the government is currently focused on growing the birth rate, how do we convince them for more freedoms regarding abortion and sterilization procedures? We need to inform them that the variables are not dependent on each other. Reproductive rights is a health issue. Creating access to abortions and sterilizations does not mean people are going to stop having children. It gives people the freedom to decide what to do with their body. This is why we came up with a campaign. The campaign highlighting diverse families shows there are a multitude of ways to raise children, rather than the traditional patriarchal family unit. The empowerment of freedom will ultimately lead to people wanting to make decisions about their future family. If the government wants to promote raising children, they should allow people to decide how they want. When talking about cultural context in Japan, it's very similar to the conservative political leaders. Japan has deeply ingrained cultural norms surrounding family and gender roles, which emphasizes the patriarchal structure of the family unit. The spousal consent requirement reflects a cultural expectation that married women should defer to their husbands in matters related to their health. It is ingrained in the medical profession, as the doctors will often require consent from a male for abortion and sterilization procedures, even if the woman is unmarried. However, these values are shifting within Japanese society. Our goal of the campaign is to shift the public perception regarding reproductive rights. Reproductive freedom is a human right, which includes the right to make your own decision about your body, get accurate information about these issues, access sexual and reproductive health services, including contraception, choose if, when, and who to marry, and decide if you want to have children and how many. The campaign is not only a promotional tool for the government to raise the birth rate, but an educational tool to highlight the importance of reproductive freedoms. Some benefits of our solution. There are a multitude of benefits in the revising in the Maternal Protection Act. Removing strict contingencies and creating clearer regulations for doctors, people will have the ability to make educational decisions about their reproductive rights, ultimately promoting gender and sexual equality in Japan. Advancing reproductive rights and gender equality can improve Japan's global standing. Our solution has the potential to boost the birth rate by empowering individual freedom. Creating more accessibility to the reproductive health will improve Japan's public health system. Removing the fear of legal prosecution for doctors will encourage healthcare providers to offer safe and high-quality reproductive care.
Thank you for listening to our ideal outcomes and solutions for this case study.